I'll never forget, my OB said, can she touch him one time before he goes? And she said, if we don't get this baby up to the NICU right now, he will die right here. And that was the beginning. That was how it started.
The diagnosis was diamond blackfan anemia. For people who don't know, it's essentially where your bone marrow cannot produce red blood cells fast enough to keep up with your normal body needs, so you end up developing anemia.
It was a lot. Our days consisted of about an appointment, sometimes 3 in a day, up to like 5 or 6 a week. We knew that it was either getting Jaxon a transplant or potentially waking up one day to his heart giving out from having iron overload.
So during all this time, he just slowly got worse and worse. November through Thanksgiving, and then around Christmas time, he was really bad.
You just have a gut feeling. I don't even know how to explain it, but I remember telling Jordan, I said, I really think this is probably going to be our last Christmas with Jaxon. So I'm going to bring him home, and we're going to go be with family for Christmas this year. And we weren't even going to do Christmas. We couldn't afford it. We couldn't afford one present, if we're being honest, because the financial burden was so bad. I was like, you know what, Jordan? I was like, we'll put it on the credit card if we have to. We're going to Target, and we bought as much as we could, and we took Jaxon home for Christmas, and it was the best Christmas ever. Granted, he only wanted to play with one toy. It was a dinosaur, of course, and it was the best Christmas ever. We got a CT that day, and upon the results of that CT, they moved him to the ICU, and the doctor told me and Jordan that we'll do everything that we can, but we don't see him going home. Basically, the only option was ECMO, and we knew at that point that if he went on ECMO, it was to put us at peace of mind that we did everything that we could for Jaxon. I remember he was so sick, they usually don't allow it, but I said, can I please just stay with him and hold his hand, because this is probably going to be the last time I ever get to see his eyes and get to talk to him. And I held his hand, and he looked at me, and the last word that he ever said was "mommy," and I think I needed that, because I didn't get to see him when he was born. I didn't get to hold him. I didn't get to hear him cry. But the last thing I heard from him was "mommy." Even if it was in his fear that he wanted me to be by him, I needed to hear him say that one more time. On Valentine's Day in 2019, he had what they call a trial off ECMO, and it's to test his ability to be able to live and breathe on his own, and he just couldn't do it. And everybody looks at you and they say, like, you're so strong and you're doing it, but what they don't see is, like, behind closed doors and driving down the highway and not being able to go to the cemetery because you know he's there and you can't pick him up. There's no way to describe it, but we're in year 2 and 2.5, almost 3, and it's rough.
I always thought that he would make it, and I held out hope. Till the day of, I thought he was actually going to come off and be fine. Mainly because he had every time before, you know? People don't mean to, but you become isolated. You don't people don't know what to say or what to do or how to approach you, so they just don't. And there's just a lot to it you just never think about, you know. Families that go through this, the financial burden, both before and after. We had no idea the expense involved in burying a child. And it's just, like she said, it's behind closed doors. You don't sleep, you don't eat, you drive down the road and you cry and you have to pull over because you can't drive. I'd be at work and somebody would come in with a respiratory illness and they'd say something and it would just remind me of Jaxon, and I'd have to leave the room and go in the bathroom and cry it out for a minute. Nobody prepares you for it. There's not words. It is still as raw now on day almost 1,000 that it was on day 1.
And then you have the sibling aspect, which I don't think anyone talks about. Maverick.
Maverick thinks he is Jaxon.
He does.
He points to Jackson's pictures and he says, "Hi, Jaxon." And it was kind of weird. I mean, from a genetic standpoint, Maverick was so dark and swarthy when he was born, and then as he's gotten older, he's changed so much, and he does look more like Jaxon now. It's been a comfort in some ways. Obviously, nobody could take Jackson's spot, but you have a reminder that's very much like him in his mannerisms. Has different interests, but
They were so close. Maverick and Jaxon were they were less than 2 years apart. We talk to him about it, and we'll tell him, you know, that's your brother. It's your brother. That was your brother. We say that is your brother because it is.
You don't want him to be an insignificant portion. You have to make sure that he's important, that he is somehow still present, and that's really my purpose in doing this, is in some small human way, trying to keep him alive. You know, make his story go on, even if he's not physically here.
This right here is Jackson's shirt.
So this is the last photographs we have of him normal. He's standing here. I say normal, but before transplant, before he lost his hair and went bald, but is in this shirt, and it's always kind of stood out as Jackson's hallmark, his calling card. My grandma made it into a quilt for us, so we still have the original. Chantel has decided to make it into a fundraiser, which we are going to turn around and use the profits from to benefit other families who are going through the same things that we are going through, and try to be helpful to them in the same ways that people were to us when we were going through it.
So we have been in contact today with St. Jude Tulsa, which were angels to us. They literally helped us figure out his diagnosis. They were with us every step of the way. And Miss Diane, Jackson's nurse, is supposed to be getting a list of people for us, just people that are close to what we've been through. And then I think we've already decided on one family, Nikki Beth and her little boy Remington, who is battling brain cancer, which does hit close to home because we know what it's like. And if you can even help in a little way, even if it's $10, that's a meal for her. If there was one thing that I took from the experience that I went through with Jaxon and him being able to be with me for 2.5 years was never take 1 minute for granted.
So the question then becomes, how do you best create those moments, or how do you use those moments? And so in our personal journey with this, the biggest reprieve to where we were able to create moments is when we didn't have to worry about certain things, whether it was a meal, whether it was affording gas to go back and forth, that type of thing. So by participating in this fundraiser, we're hoping that we can be the blessing to somebody else, so somebody else can enjoy and use those moments with their loved one and maximize their time, whether that's a lot of time or a little bit of time, but whatever time they have, to make the most of it and enjoy it and make memories, because in the end that's really all you're left with.